think it kind of like, my group at least, we kind of just like brainstormed a little bit, tried some new ideas, and like kind of tried to think through it a little bit. I mean, a couple ideas weren't the best, and some ideas were good. So.
Okay, yeah, that's good. What about the tiki idea with the string that I saw happening over here? Was that one of the original ideas? Did that one come later on?
I think it was one of our original ideas. I think it got changed as it went, but I think we originally were like, it needs to be as stable as possible, and so we just went with that and kept making it work.
Okay, very good. I didn't see a lot of teams using the string, but you guys did a pretty good job on that. And the team over here, the winning team, I don't know if you guys had a lot of proposal of ideas, but we were explaining earlier, which was, trying something and then tweaking it. Kind of goes back to Sophie's point, where that is kind of the best situation. And so when I measured you guys, when I measured your tower, what did I say to you guys? I said keep going, right? Because that was one of the best things that you guys did, is that you didn't wait till the end to see whether it was going to be freestanding or not. If you hadn't been the tallest group at that moment, maybe you would have been motivated to actually, keep going and try different things. Of course, at that point, you were the only one that had measured. You guys were pretty tall, and so you didn't really have a lot of reason to keep trying. You guys were already the best at that point. But anyway, the next stage would be the norming stage, and so that's when you realize, like, okay, we definitely have to work together. We have to start, stop disagreeing with each other, perhaps. I'm not sure if any of you got to that point, or if it got ugly at any point. And if it didn't, then you kind of don't really go through the norming stage, right? You maybe had norms and expectations settled from the very beginning. And then the performing stage, which was actually assembling the spaghetti, hoping that it was going to stand up by itself, putting the marshmallow on the top. Did any groups put the marshmallow on the spaghetti before? Yeah, you guys did? You guys did? Yeah, that was also a good strategy that I saw some people using, that I've seen people using online as well, is not waiting for the last minute to do that last step, which is always the worst step, which breaks down your tower. Anyway, there was no adjourning stage in this case, but if it was, I feel, well, actually, you know what? Maybe there was, because I felt you guys, lingering a little bit and asking for one more minute and stuff like that. And so that was the last stage where you guys had to break apart and start listening to me, which none of you wanted to do, understandably so. All right, so if there's no questions, let's talk about another pattern of team development that's very famous as well. It's called the punctuated equilibrium theory by Gersik, 1988. And so it's different in the sense that there's not like a stage that precedes the next and so on, right? So the pattern of behavior here, especially for the first half, is formed at the very beginning, right? So you have an idea, and you go through it, you make assumptions that it's going to work, you establish a pattern for behavior, and you keep going. You have this inertia, and you keep going. You keep trying the tiki tower, you keep trying the tape, you keep trying whatever it is that you were trying originally. And so the punctuated equilibrium model here would suggest that midway point of the project, right when I said you guys have 10 minutes left out of 20 or something like that, you guys would take a moment, you would realize whether whatever it is that you're doing works or doesn't work, and if you realize that it's not working, you switch your plan and you continue on for the rest of the time with a different plan, with a different set of patterns of behaviors. Did any teams experience that? Yeah? Okay, you guys, was it when I called time? Was it before or after?
It was like at the halfway point, our first plan wasn't working, so we had to figure something else out.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And you kind of realize that it's not working, that your original approach is not going to get you to complete your task, which was, a tall freestanding tower. And actually those teams that do plan a new approach about halfway through are usually the ones that tend to do better off in the end. And so if you hadn't done that, if you had continued on with your original plan, maybe your tower wouldn't even have stood up by itself, right? And that's because, again, of this narrowing of perspective that we have, right? We think of a solution and we think it might be the best one and we just go for it. taking a step back and thinking of your original approach is actually going to be really, really beneficial in a team, especially because of groupthink, right? We tend to convince each other that what we're doing is the best way, it's the best thing to do, and it's just super convenient not to bring up other points, other contradictory points. At that point, you're already halfway through, right? But when you do, you're better. You're more likely to be better off. And one thing that's interesting in this second perspective for team development is that the group's progress is triggered more by the team members' awareness of time and of progress rather than the completion of an absolute amount of work at a specific stage. So it's not like you halfway through said, okay, do I have 6 inches so far, or do I have 10 inches so far, right? It was more about assessing the whole situation as a whole based on your time and the progress that you have done. So let's talk about types of team interdependence. And team interdependence can be subdivided into 3 kinds. So the first kind that we see here is goal interdependence. It's having a shared vision of what you need to do. Kind of being able to put your individual goals aside and think of the group goal first and put yours, on the sidelines. Can anyone think of a board game where you have to do that kind of stuff? Or a video game or something like that? So we had one of the PhD students like 2 years ago use the game Pandemic for his dissertation. Are you guys familiar? Anyone with Pandemic? Would anyone care to share what it kind of requires people to do? So you have you have team members, and you could be positioned kind of all over the world, right, virtually, and there are diseases that spread. And correct me if I'm wrong, anyone who's sitting that is familiar with it. And so each person has a different role, right? There's a medic, there's a scientist, there's other roles like that, and your goal is to try to stop the diseases from spreading and for everyone to be infected pretty much. So I have my own personal goals. You might have other goals as a medic. You might want to keep more people healthy. I as a environmentalist might want to keep the environment safer, right? So we have contradicting goals. But this goal interdependence would suggest that we would put those aside and that we would think of the higher level goal, right? What is our goal as a team in this game of Pandemic would be actually to stop the disease from spreading. And there's a lot more information that goes into it. It's actually really, really hard. I've never won myself. I don't take pride in that. But anyway, that's one of the examples that you could think about. I guess, Monopoly. We all have our own goals when we play Monopoly, and we could think of the society and the greater good if we want to be nice and we want to loan our friends some money, right? But no, shaking of heads, no. Right, so it's really hard to think of, to have a shared vision in those kinds of situations. But nevertheless, when we're talking about a work team, something that is in a professional setting, we definitely want to have this shared vision that will take us forward. So the second one listed here is outcome interdependence, and this one talks about more actually the outcomes, like pay, bonuses, feedback, other kinds of incentives that might or might not be tied to the team overall or to the individuals. And so a high level of outcome interdependence would be Lindt chocolates for the whole team if the whole team performs well, right? Whereas a low outcome interdependence, a low level of outcome interdependence would be one where, it would be, we are part of a team. It would be helpful if, I help you, you help me, we get a better outcome overall. But nevertheless, I'm going to be rewarded for my individual performance. My bonus at the end of the year, or whatever it is going to come from the number of sales that I did myself. The third one that we see here is task interdependence, and then we'll talk about all 4 types of task interdependence here. And this is how much I rely on you for these materials, information, and stuff like that. So in the Marshmallow Challenge, you guys weren't really given individual information, but if, for example, I had said, you know, you should, if I had told one of you, hey, you should use the string this way, or you should use the tape this way, then the task interdependence here would be of, you know, for that individual member to spread the information so that everyone else could use this information in the team. Does that make sense? So we'll talk about pooled, sequential, reciprocal, and comprehensive. And actually the one with the lowest degree of required coordination is pooled, and then the highest degree is going to be comprehensive. We'll see why in just a moment. So here we have a diagram that represents pool interdependence. It's going to be a lot like a sales team, right? You might walk into a car dealership and you see like 20 people trying to approach you, trying to sell you a car. It doesn't matter for, in this scenario, who you end up buying the car from, because the total output, right, the total number of cars sold is just going to be piled up. It's going to be added together in that case. That's not necessarily the case for car, salesmen, because they do get their individual commission. But for purposes of just illustrating this, it's kind of like an additive perspective where you just add my sales with your sales and so on, and then we tally up at the end of the day, for example. And there's not really coordination that is needed here, right? As long as I'm making my sales, you're making your own sales, you could be covering the front door, I could be covering the back door, but that's not necessarily needed as long as we're all, busy in making sales. Now, sequential interdependence, as you can see here on the diagram and also by its name, it does require a little bit of coordination. It's not as freestanding, feeling as a pooled interdependence, because the tests do need to be done in a particular order specifically. Coordination is going to be just innate because you're going to have to, member one is going to have to coordinate with member two, maybe with one, making sure that they get their stuff, but also with three, and so on and so forth. But if you think about it, 1 and 3 don't really need to coordinate, right? And 4 and 1 and 4 and 2 and so on, they don't need to coordinate. So it's a low level of coordination because it's not completely crossed, if you would, right? It's only with certain people that you're working with. Actually, in contrary, we see here that reciprocal interdependence is not just unidirectional, right? It's bidirectional. We see here that member 1, relies on 2, and 2 also relies on 1, for example. And so reciprocal interdependence here is similar to sequential, except that there's more interdependence, right? We're adding more coordination and that is needed in order to get the job done. Think of a basketball team. That's what I was thinking when I was putting these slides together, right? So the output being, making a basket, shooting the basketball into the hoop. And so you don't just have the person in the back throwing it to the person in the front, and then the one that's closer to the hoop makes it in. Like, that's absolutely not how it is, right? You have your defense on the other team that's blocking you, that's making you go back and forth between team members in a basketball team. And then eventually you would make the basket, right? Hopefully. Does that make sense? All right, so the last one is the highest level of interdependence, and it's called the comprehensive interdependence. And really through high levels of collaboration, comprehensive interdependence eliminates groupthink, which is this idea that I was just talking about, which actually can be very negative within teams. So actually comprehensive interdependence is going to eliminate groupthink because it's going to bounce these ideas. Think of like a new product development team. You're going to have to, talk with the sales, and the sales are going to have to talk with accounting is going to have to talk with VP, and so on and so forth. And you have arrows in every single direction, which are very much likely to eliminate groupthink because one of these people, one of these team members is likely to bring up something that hasn't been brought up already. So once again, in case it's not clear, groupthink is it's kind of the idea, the state that we reach in a team where we're all in agreement with each other, which is kind of, it's not unexpected, expected, but if you think about it, we're all coming with different perspectives, we're all coming with different experience, and to just think that we're all gonna agree on something, it's just a little bit odd. In reality, what happens is that people, like I said before, they don't want to stand up to other people, they are ashamed of bringing in contradictory ideas, and in the end, you end up just going with your original idea with the team, and it's not the best for team performance, right? This comprehensive interdependence is going to be the best for team performance, for team effectiveness, and for reaching this output, whatever it may be. So, which type of task interdependence can best describe the marshmallow activity? Maybe different groups have different types of interdependence as well.
I would say,
Go ahead.
okay, so for ours, we kind of had sequential going at one point, because like one person was cutting the tape, one person was like breaking the spaghetti sticks, and like one person was trying to attach them together, and then somebody else was trying to build the structure.
Yeah, that's a great point. You couldn't do that without the tape, and yeah, that's a great example of a sequential interdependence. Did you have a different one?
I was gonna say comprehensive. I think like kind of, once you have like an idea of what we're gonna do, we kind of just all work together and try to help each other out along the way.
Yeah, that's also totally reasonable. Totally reasonable to have different kinds of interdependence that led to, better or worse outcomes or similar outcomes included. So what is the advantage of comprehensive? What is the disadvantage that you could think of? Let's start at the comprehensive, at the highest level of coordination that's needed. Yes?
You could step on other members' toes. If you're all kind of doing similar things, and there could be lack of boundaries.
Yeah, that's a great point actually, because if it's not really clear what I'm supposed to be doing in the team, right? If I'm supposed to be bouncing off ideas off of you and you off of me, but in reality I have a higher title, it could get problematic for sure. It could also be more time consuming, right? Than a sequential interdependence, for example, especially if with the sequential interdependence the roles are already established, then there's no going back. You just keep going forward, right? Whether it's with a great idea or not, like that's just a different story.
Yeah, so like the bystander effect too, it's like everyone kind of looks around and expects that the other person will do the next thing that's necessary to get done. Like, so no one actually, it's possible, it could happen that no one actually acts because everyone thinks the other person's gonna do the next thing.
Yeah, and that's just a problem overall when you have low coordination, low interdependence, low communication in a team, especially when roles are already established, right? It's much more efficient to be able to speak your mind if you have something, if you see that someone's doing nothing, can you go up to them and say, hey, can you do something, right? As opposed to say, well, maybe they're just not supposed to do anything, right? And just play it out. Those are great points. So any disadvantages of perhaps the pool? We haven't talked much about that one. What are the pros and cons of pooled interdependence?
If there's a con, if there's not good communication between it, the individual tasks that everyone's assigned might not flow less well. You don't give each other enough time to combine all of them.
Yeah, like what if they're trying to do the same exact thing, right? So what if two salespeople are trying to target the same client and walked into the dealership? That's super inefficient, right? Because I don't need to compete with you as long as one of us is going to get that sale, right? And so that's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy and resources to not be in coordination when it comes to stuff like that. That's a great point as well. All right, so here is all of them put together, and what this green arrow says is the degree of coordination that's required, right? So a higher level of degree of coordination is required for the comprehensive compared to the pool, as we've talked about before. And so you might spend more time on communication and coordination, which may hinder your productivity if you are spending time on things that are not necessarily task related. Make sense? The good thing is that when there is a lot of communication, coordination, interdependence, the team is much more able to handle unexpected situations, to handle maybe crisis or whatever it is that comes at them. They can handle them much better. Now, for those interdependents that require a lower degree of coordination, they might be more efficient, right? I don't have to go to you, I'm just gonna do my job, especially if I know that I come before, member 2 and member 3. And so for that reason, it's more efficient, if you would. But if something does disrupt the pattern of behavior that had been happening so far, not very likely to be able to handle it very well and to move on with the new pattern of behavior. And as we always talk about, I'll mention this, that task interdependence is moderately positively related to team performance. I think this is pretty straightforward. However, we see the task interdependence has a weak relationship with team commitment. Can anyone try to explain why we see a weak relationship there with commitment? Yeah.
Maybe because if you're doing all of your tasks individually, you don't feel as reliant on the other people, and you feel like, well, I can do this one, I can just do them all, and so you don't feel as obligated to them, you don't really work with them.
So from a feedback perspective, right? So if you're getting positive feedback, if you're doing what you need to do, then that's just not gonna maybe, directly affect your commitment to the organization, right? It could be that there are differences with occupation, with teams, with tasks particularly. If I don't need to work with other people, if I am, for example, in a task that is old interdependence type, then, it's just not gonna affect my commitment. It's gonna be whatever. It doesn't say negative, it just says like a weak relationship, right? It's not a strong negative, it's just weak. And the other thing that I usually have up here, although you might be past this point of putting together measures for your group project, if you're not, and some of your people have mentioned these stuff during your interviews, you can use this scale to measure their task interdependence goal and also outcome interdependence at their jobs. All right, so I'll jump into team composition. Again, of course, stop me if you have any questions. I'm going fairly fast because of the marshmallow challenge. So what is the right mix of knowledge, skills, abilities, personalities, cultural backgrounds, values, and all the other stuff that we've talked about? How could we possibly know what the perfect mix is for a team? There's research teams that study NASA groups, that study all sorts of, teams that are in unexpected, that are in new situations, and they're trying to predict what kind of team composition is going to be the best one, right? They're saying, should we have two men and 2 women? Should we have 4 of the same gender? Should we have, 1 and 1 and then different ages? Should we have all the same ages, and so on and so forth? There's just like an unlimited amount of combinations that you could test, which is super problematic actually. And so a lot of times in research you see that the researchers focus on some of these, and there's just so many things that you could predict with each of them individually. So we're going to talk about 5 aspects of team composition today, and we'll get started with member roles. So a role is defined as a pattern of behavior that a person is expected to display in a certain situation. My role as an instructor leads me to get up here every Monday and Wednesday around 4 o'clock and lecture or put together a discussion or a group activity, right? And your role as students requires you to typically sit there, kind of listen to me, participate, and so on and so forth. And although we're not really a team like the type we've talked about, this kind of relationship, this context could not be done without the other, right? There could not be a classroom or there could not be a class in OB without an instructor, and there's probably not going to be a class in OB if there's no students signed up for the class, right? So it is interdependence for sure, even when there are different roles in a team. So there's 3 broad types of team member roles, and the first one is the task role. And these are behaviors that directly contribute to accomplishing the task at hand. And so what I listed here for all 3 types of member roles is kind of examples of what these people would be doing. So for task-related roles, you have a coordinator, you have an orienter who's going to be orienting people on what they're supposed to be doing. You also have the devil's advocate who might be, promoting an idea that goes against what the other team members have been talking about, right? Kind of to break the groupthink stage that a group might be in. You also have an energizing that might keep people going, et cetera, et cetera. But the goal here for these people is to accomplish task performance, right? And that's what's going to differentiate them from team building roles and also from individualistic roles. Now, for team building roles, actually, these are members that are going to be engaging in behaviors that influence the quality of the team's social climate. What are their goals? Pretty much to keep people going when they're when they're feeling down. For example, encouraging people, making sure that there's harmony and peace within the group. Sometimes we could have the conflicts that we've talked about before, and these members that have these team building roles would be there to engage in citizenship behaviors and to keep the peace in the team. You might have someone who is compromising, right, who's bringing ideas, kind of like a mediator, contradicting ideas, putting them together, saying, hey, we could do this part of this idea and this one, putting them together, ready to move on, and so on and so forth. Now, the third type of member role is an individualistic role, and that is kind of the opposite of the team building role, because it's a very selfish role. It's kind of a destructive role, if you would. And it reflects behaviors that benefit the individual at the expense of the team, actually, right? And so you might have someone who is just, if everyone's on board with an idea, they might just be shooting down the idea, not in order to break groupthink and to, develop better performance and effectiveness, but just because they just don't want to do that, right? Someone who's going to be aggressive, someone who is going to be dominating the conversation just because, right? Not in a task performance way, but more in a counterproductive way, okay? Definitely someone who is not actively engaging in something, but is just lacking in the team could be considered a member that has an individualistic role as well. And so, going back to the marshmallow activity, because we haven't enough today, this is so interesting, and this comes from a TED Talk. We're not going to be watching it today because we've done enough, but what's interesting is that those who perform poorly are actually business school graduates, or in your case, business school students, compared to those young children that don't have really all of these business-like ideas in our mind already, right? Such as graduates of kindergarten, literally young children, like this. They were able to put together not only tall structures, but also very interesting structures, right? Structures that were just out of the box, let's just say. So why is that? Why do kindergartners perform better than graduate school graduates or students? So I haven't heard from you guys whether you have assigned roles within your teams, whether you said, hey, I'll be making the decisions. But what we did hear just now in the example of the sequential interdependence is that there were some roles that were assigned, right? I'm going to be cutting the tape, you're going to be putting the string, you're going to be making the tower, and so on and so forth. Well, the kindergarten children did not do that. They were not thinking about who was going to do what. They did not spend any time conjecturing what was going to be best, right? What was going to be the ultimate solution for the tallest freestanding tower. Definitely no leader, but I don't think we had a leadership problem in this classroom anyway. And then they were super engaged and not very distracted. It's kind of like giving a kid a toy, if you would. Now, grad school graduates in this particular experiment, it's actually a TED Talk by one of the researchers, and he's done it like over 70 times, and this is kind of an average of everything he's done. So, grad school, business school graduates, they often lied, they kind of cheated, right? I won't say any names, but they were trying to hang things from the ceiling and, maybe holding things when the professor wasn't looking. And just overall, the kids were just not trying to figure out who had the power, who was gonna be the CEO, they were just jumping right to the task. And the other thing is, just our nature as business, business students is to think again of the best plan, of the right plan. We don't jump into, immediately thinking of a solution or trying something where we like to brainstorm because that's what we've been told to do. That's what we've been told that works best, right? Brainstorm and then act on it. Brainstorm and then write your 5-paragraph essay. We heard that since middle school, right? But the truth is, it doesn't work well for all tasks, right? Some tasks require us to just jump in and do. Anyway, speaking of team composition, let's talk now about member ability. Because we've already talked about ability last class, I don't think I have to explain why general cognitive ability, general mental ability, GMA, whatever you want to call it, is really important in determining the team member's performance overall. Now, what's really interesting when it comes to member ability is the kind of task that is at hand, right? Because I think we could all think of a situation where the highest level able person was able to drive the team, and also where the slowest or lowest level of cognitive mental ability in a team member was actually bringing the team down. So, as an example for disjunctive tasks, we can think back to our exam 1 review activity, right? What did we do? Jeopardy, right? And so, which one do you think this was? Was it about the member with the highest ability, or was it about the member with the lowest ability? Member with the highest ability, that's right. We didn't really need all 5, 6, or 7 people in a group to know all of the answers, right? We just needed one person per question to know the answer, right? And then some trust, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't trust them that they knew the answer. So yeah, in that case, it was really not needed that all people knew the answer. It was just about highest ability determining the team performance. It obviously doesn't hurt if everyone knows the answer, but that's just not how team performance was determined in that case. Now, as for conjunctive tasks, these are tasks where it's kind of the opposite, right? So the slowest member or member with the lowest ability will actually negatively impact the performance of a team. So how many of you are familiar with flip cup? Me too. So what do you have to do with flip cup? You have to flip, I'm not going to do it, but you have to flip the cup, right? And so typically you have 2 teams on both sides of a table, and you have maybe 4, 5, 6 people, whatever it is, and you have to drink your drink and flip the cup. And so if I'm really slow, I'm going to mess up my whole team, right? Because the next person in my team cannot go until I correctly, efficiently flip my solo cup, right? Usually. So that one is an example of a sequential interdependence, right? Where the slowest team member will actually negatively impact team performance, for sure. Make sense? Now, the last one is additive, and this one is kind of parallel with a pooled interdependence, right? So, again, as long as I'm contributing to my team, we're just going to add it up, and it's going to determine team performance. So let's do a little practice exercise here. Let's say you have 4 candidates for 2 group projects. You could put any of the 4 in the 2 group projects, all right? You have 2 of them that are very smart. A and B are very smart, and A is smarter than B. And 2 of them that are not that smart, but C is smarter than D. Now think about this for a minute and determine how you would assign the 4 candidates into the 2 groups. which two team members, which two candidates would you group together for the disjunctive project, and which two would you put on the conjunctive project? Yes.
I would put A with D and B with C, because A would carry D all the way to the end, and B would be held back as much by C. So that's why.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. So what goes with that answer is where you would put each one. So A and D would go with disjunctive or which?
Disjunctive.
Disjunctive, good job, yeah. So in the disjunctive group, we would want A and D because A is gonna be able to carry the team forward, as you were just saying. In the conjunctive group, we could put B and C just as long as D is not there because D is the slowest or the lowest able group and it's gonna, bring the group down. Does that make sense? All right. So this is important stuff and this is how we can apply it, right? When we are managers and we have teams that we have to put together, you do want to keep all this information at hand and think of what the task is really asking. What do you need them to do? What do you need your members to do? Let's talk about personality. Hopefully you haven't forgotten about it. It was covered in exam 1, but we're bringing it back for just a little bit. We talked about how we really cannot really bring people into our organization based on personality unless we have other reasons as well. We cannot fire people based on personalities. But the truth is that when we put teams together at work, we're going to be stuck with a bunch of personalities put together. You're usually going to be deciding teams like we just did based on abilities, cognitive mental ability, for example, not necessarily their personality. But agreeable people, as we already know, are cooperative, they're trusting, they're going to keep the harmony in the group, they're going to be good people to have. So no need to worry too much about them. Now, conscientious people, again, they tend to be dependable, they tend to work hard. Why wouldn't we want these people in our teams, right? The more, the merrier, perhaps. And last, let's talk about extroversion here, right? Extroverted people are going to be the people that are going to be really good at interpersonal situations, right? They're going to be positive, they're going to be optimistic. Therefore, can we conclude that an agreeable guy, a conscientious guy, and an extroverted guy would be the best team? Maybe, right? It's hard. It's just really hard to predict these sorts of things. But it's also not true. I mean, it's not true, but it's just hard to predict. And it's also something to keep in mind is that too much agreeableness, too much conscientiousness, and too much extroversion might backfire, right? So let's talk about that for a second. Too many agreeable team members in one team will probably lead to groupthink, first of all, right? No one wants to contradict anyone. The first idea is probably going to be the one that they run with for the rest of the time. Now, too many extroverts might backfire because it's kind of like a power struggle, right? We tend to have a dominance issue, right, of who's going to carry the conversations, who's going to introduce the new person, who's going to, et cetera, in all of these social situations. And so that could be bad as well. And lastly, although conscientiousness is a great personality to have, it is great to have a high level of conscientiousness at an individual level and also at a team level. But let's think for a second about what would happen if we had just one person with low conscientiousness. So when we think about all of these personality traits, we're not only thinking, hopefully, about what happens at high levels of these, right? But we should also be thinking about what happens when we have one person that's not agreeable, one person that is, an introvert. Maybe not so much a big deal. But when we have one group member, of course, more, it would be worse. When we have one group member with low conscientiousness, they're going to be, not performing their part of the group. They're not going to be able to complete their, slides for the group project or whatever it is, bring in the materials, right? And so that's going to have very negative impacts on the social situation of the group and also obviously on the task performance, on the task progress of the group. It's just going to slow the whole group down because the person's just not responsible. Okay, let's talk about team diversity here. Diversity being the degree to which members are different from one another, and this is on attributes that we typically categorize people. So, any ideas on which attributes we could use? Like gender?
I have a question. Would personality not count as like diverse?
Yeah. So it could count as a type of diversity. Yeah, it could. This is more of attributes that you could actually categorize people with, and we don't usually say, oh, here are the extroverts. But we do say, oh, like all the female are sitting, together, or all the old men are sitting together, whatever it is, right? So here are some examples. It could be gender, age, race, nationality, if it's, something that you could tell. Personality is definitely on here as well. You could think of people with similar values as well, right? So it's not just things that we could immediately see with your eye, but things that would categorize people just in general. And so there's two opposing theories about team diversity, and I think you might be able to think about this in a very rational way. So theory one here is the value in diversity problem-solving approach. And so this theory suggests that diversity is a good thing. And so the more diversity, the better we're going to be off in terms of team performance, team effectiveness, right? We're going to have people that have no experience. We're going to, that come with fresh experience, with fresh ideas. We're also going to have a team that has team members that have a lot of experience because they have problem-solving, experience and stuff like that. The same with personality and with attitudes. Just overall, according to this perspective, diversity in teams will be beneficial because it's going to provide a larger pool of resources, of ideas, and so on and so forth. Now, the opposite to this is a theory that we use a lot in OB actually, and it's called similarity attraction theory or similarity attraction approach. And this says that people tend to like people that are like them, right? And so if we think about all of the diversity attributes that were listed here on the slides just a second ago, we do see sometimes that younger people hang out with younger people and that older people hang out with older people. What else? We see from Orange is the New Black, if anyone's watched this show, we see the Hispanic girls, hang out with the Hispanic girls and they listen to Hispanic music and whatever. What else? We see just based on race, based on nationality and all of these other attributes that people usually like to hang out with people that they have similar, similar behaviors or attitudes with. This also suggests that we avoid people who don't, and that's kind of not the same, right? So it's not really the same to say I'm more attracted to people who are similar than to say I actively avoid people who are different, right? And so with this perspective in mind, we would argue that diversity is not a good thing because we don't like to be in teams where we have, different race, age, gender, whatever it is. So it is really the opposite. Now, there is no right or wrong. I can't even give you a recipe for different situations or anything like that. But what we can talk about is the timeline of a team, right? And so which kind of attributes are much more visual or observable at the very beginning. And so really the answer to this question is that it depends. It depends because in order to understand the impact of diversity on a team, on its performance, we have to consider not only the type of diversity that we're looking at, but also the length of time that the team has been working together. You guys have known each other for a few weeks now. I didn't even know you, a few weeks ago, a few months ago. But it could be very different than if I had done, the marshmallow activity on the first day. You wouldn't know each other at all. And you'd actually, at that point, at an initial point of a team, you would rely more on surface level diversity to make your, attributions, to, make your decisions on who you would want to collaborate with, for example, in a team. And these are observable attributes, like gender, for example, things that can be seen at this stage. stage, right? You don't have to go down into the water to see surface level diversity. However, for deep level diversity, we do. And those are attributes that are more of, our personalities, our values, our, other stuff like that that's not necessarily observable beliefs is on here as well. And so the truth is that we cannot assess surface level diversity, whether we have that diversity or not, right away. And so we do jump to conclusions based on surface level diversity at first. And then over time, the importance that we assign to surface level kind of declines, and we start paying a lot more attention to deep level diversity once we can within our team. So there's both positive and negative effects of both surface and deep level diversity. And so regarding the positive effect, deep level diversity actually does tend to have a more positive effects on teams. And that's because eventually, once you do find, the values, beliefs, and attitudes of other people, it can lead to better performance than just your age and your gender. That doesn't really mean very much in terms of team performance. However, and also the deep level diversity can offer a larger, knowledge and information pool. Just because we're different gender, just because we're different age, it doesn't mean I know more, right? It is going to be about those deep level attributes. And like I said before, surface level diversity, the importance of it is going to decrease over time, and deep level diversity is actually going to increase over time. And so I'm super rushing here because we are kind of running out of time, but stop me if you have questions. Here is a research example that talks about not only the two types of diversities, as you can see, on the top we have surface level diversity, on the bottom we have deep level diversity, but we also have time in this model, which is very important. And so this is, at first we have actual deep level and surface level diversity that's going to predict the perceived deep level and surface level correspondingly. But what's really important here is that they both have a negative effect on social integration, right? How much you're gonna talk to the other team members and coordinate and do all of the social aspects of team processes. And as you can see here, I highlighted that the more collaboration that you spend, the more time you spend with your team collaborating, that's a better way of saying it. As you can see, there's a negative effect on surface level diversity, right? And so the surface level diversity kind of weakens with time. The more you collaborate with your team, the less impact surface level diversity will have on something like social integration. Now, we see the opposite with deep level diversity, such that the more time you spend interacting with your team members, right, the higher level of collaboration is actually going to increase the relationship between deep level diversity and social integration. Therefore, actually, because we have a positive effect and a negative effect, it's going to weaken the negative effect. So deep level diversity is not going to be as bad with time, right? It gets better with time. And if you wanted to, you could assess your own diversity at a deep level diversity in your group projects, any other teams. Perhaps you have an internship or a job, and you could use this scale to see really how different you are from other team members. Here are just the instructions for how to code it and what each score would mean if you wanted to interpret it. And the last thing I want to bring up today in terms of team composition is team size. So how many of you think that the more the merrier is the way to go in terms of team size? No one? Okay, so I guess you all raise your hand for too many cooks spoil the pot? Yeah? Okay. Did you think that that was the case in the marshmallow activity as well? Yeah, I see. Yeah?
I mean, it was only a team of me and Jake, so it worked out really nicely because, I don't know, we get along pretty well, and there wasn't anyone really overbearing, but I feel like if there were maybe 5 or 6, it'd be kind of more people in the shadows and only 1 or 2 people really doing the project.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I'm glad you guys had a team of 2 because some other teams had maybe a team of 4 or 5, right? Did you guys feel like you were, having too many cooks in the kitchen? Yes?
Well, one thing is like when there's a lot of people, you feel the need to, probably the kindergartners didn't do, but you feel the need for everyone to like say what they think, what they think, what they think. And if you don't say it, you feel like you have to say something even though you might not be the most like, you might not know very well, and then you kind of have to acknowledge what they're saying. And,
You
like,
have to be polite.
yeah, it's-
Yeah, you have to be polite and listen to other people. So when you have a lot of people, it kind of sucks, right? It could be a waste of time if they're not bringing in good perspectives. Well, I don't have a recipe. I don't have an answer for this one. Also, it depends on the type of team and the interdependence that you have, the type of interdependence that you have. The truth is that more people is actually better for management teams and for project teams because the work is more complicated and it's more complex. And so when you have things like that, you definitely do want more ideas bouncing around. Even if it is a waste of time, you're more likely to find a better solution at that level of complexity. But for production teams, for things that are very simple that you could handle with a small number of people, you're going to be better off having a small team size in that case. And so Jeff Bezos has been quoted for saying, if we can't feed the team with 2 pizzas, then it's too big. And so that's just one perspective on how Amazon CEO handles situations. It's obviously worked out, right? So here's a summary of everything we've talked about in terms of team characteristics. I did have a case study. We're definitely not going to be doing it today, but here are some issues to consider in terms of your own group project. And you don't have to, write anything down, but just think about it, and it might help your effectiveness, especially for this second half. Finishing off phase 1 and starting phase 2 with your group project. We'll do the case study on Wednesday, as it'll be totally relevant because we're still going to be talking about teams. And that's it. We're going to have a quiz on Wednesday, and like I said earlier at the beginning of the lecture, please give me your progress. I think it'll be really helpful if you at least email me your hypothesis. And for those people who have emailed me their hypothesis over the weekend, I'll get back to you tonight. Just give you a thumbs up or give you some tips on how to modify them. So as long as we're in contact on that way, so I'm just afraid that people are on their own track about it. I can look at those and then want to talk about them now. Okay, that's fine, yeah. But I will say that I think it's so much better to
You all Wednesday?
I appreciate it. Yeah. For example, hey, and then this effect is stronger or weaker for.
Yeah, so we had like for both sectors, this will affect this, but only for one sector, this will affect.
Yeah, but the only way to actually analyze that is using model meters, which you definitely don't suggest you guys do at this point, or having like 30 people who are in the public and 30 people who are in the private, and then running your correlations and comparing correlations.
Okay. Okay.
Because 15 and 15 would just be too little. So let me think about this, because maybe if you do like
Just
20
let us,
and
yeah,
30,
let us know.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And then, real curious, is there gonna be a peer-to-peer evaluation for Shocking Grove, like in the?
Definitely a
Okay.
peer evaluation form, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
'Cause it's like 3 out of 7 of us, so
Oh
like
my
even,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm trying to remember who else is in your team, but I think I kind of know. If you need me to step in, then you can write in the thread or whatever it is. If
In our
you
group
were,
chat, we said for the next 2 parts of this project, you guys need to,
okay, yeah. So then if you, yeah, that's the right thing to do. But then I don't want you to be stuck with nothing. So at some point before it gets to the end of the semester, if I have to step in and say like, hey, you guys are on your own,
Okay.
You know, because if I have to do that, then I could say like, okay, you've collected your own data, but then you've done nothing, so from now on, you're on group of 3.
Okay.
I don't,
I'll
ideally,
let
they
you
would
know,
just do
yeah.
it.
We'll see.
I know, yeah,
I'll let you
okay.
know, thank you.
Yes, keep me updated.
Okay, we gotta go.
Do you know anything about
Do we also need to
Brian?
throw this away? Brian?
That's
I know,
why-
Well,
I
there's
just
more
don't know.
marshmallows. Do you guys want the marshmallows?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, enjoy.
We gotta go to work.
Oh, is that a phone?
Looks like a calculator,
Oh,
like a financial
okay, that's
calculator.
better.
You got your tablet,
Yeah.
you wanna-
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw that away.
Yeah, I don't know where Brian 223L is.
Yeah, there's a, there's an elevator there that has like a little map on the side. Okay, that's just.
Did you have a question for me?
Not, waiting for my friend.
Oh, okay. Is that her calculator?
I think no.
Okay.
Oh, in fact, I have a question.
Sure.
It's about our group that.
Yes, you emailed me.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Do I need to come to the office again? Okay.
No. My answer was not yes.
Oh.
My answer was a good question. It depends. If I see you guys are on the right track, I'll let you know, and then you can come see me if you want to. I feel like not having any communication is gonna be really bad, and so having some communication might be just fine. Okay, I'll email you back.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, that's fine. Bye.